Welcome to OutWithDan, the podcast that spotlights and examines the voices of LGBTQ+ authors, characters, and our allies. Together, we lift our voices and we tell our stories. I'm Dan White. Join me as I chat with this week's author. Hello and welcome back to Out with Dan. I'm excited to talk to ReShonda Tate about With Love from Harlem. ReShonda is an award-winning journalist and author, and she has written a love story to Harlem, among other things. Welcome, ReShonda.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm absolutely thrilled to have you join me. So I knew some things about the subjects of this book, but I didn't know nearly enough. So will you give the audience a setup of what With Love from Harlem is about?
Yes, sir. It is about the story of Hazel Scott. Before Beyonce, before Oprah, there was Hazel. Hazel was the first Black woman to have her own television show. She opened doors for civil rights. She made audiences integrated. She refused to perform to segregated audiences. And at the time, she was really one of the biggest artists of her time. And then she was erased from history because she had a group of men who deemed her a communist.
Yes, and I will tell you that those are some of the things that I did not know. I mean, number one, I will say this, I may be burned at the stake by the Jazz Tribunal, but in my opinion, Hazel Scott is as important as Art Tatum and Oscar Peterson to the piano, and her talent is just so enormous. And yet, just as you say, there's so much about her that has been erased from history.
Yes, she was a musical prodigy. I mean, so she, trained at Juilliard when she was a little girl, and she was such a talent before she met Adam Clayton Powell Jr., who later became her husband. So they married, she was already a star, already a big star. So I was fascinated by all that I discovered about her because I knew about her and her talents on the piano. I didn't know any of the other stuff.
Yeah, and I will say that there are several correlations that I'm going to make to other people in the music industry that it is just so disappointing to really get into our country's past history. How many different people of color were erased by the federal government, by state governments, by local governments? And here's a woman who really was at the top of her game as far as a pianist goes. And then, for the House Un-American Activities Committee, or ever how that is, for them to drag her and label her as a communist, they knew what they were doing. Right. This wasn't by accident. This was a powerful woman who was talented, who had a voice, and they did exactly what they wanted to by trying to, and in some ways succeeding in ruining her career.
They did. They set out to silence her voice, and they succeeded.
Yes. And then I'm not going to give her husband a pass either, because right. I find it is so sad in this world when we're attracted to something like beauty or talent or whatever that thing is, and then our desire to possess it goes way beyond where it should go. I mean, who asked a talented human being like Hazel Scott to give up her career to be a wife? But it happens a lot.
It happens a lot. And then his expectation and the members of his church, that was their expectation. Okay, yes, you're this big star. She made more money than him. But they're like, oh, but you're a wife now. And wives support their husbands, not the other way around.
Yeah. And, I do wonder if we could rewrite history and we could change their attitudes. What might she have accomplished even greater with him by her side rather than her by his side?
And that's a big part of this story, is the clash of egos. And so one of the things that are just realizations that I came is when you have two stars shining brightly, one of them is bound to dim. And most of the time it's going to be the woman's star who dims. And I just think of all that they could have accomplished if egos had been set aside.
100%. Because, you see time after time in what you present to us is the humanity of Hazel Scott. I mean, she really was a steadfast friend, and she was someone who was very loyal. She was loyal to her son. She was loyal to her friend Billie Holiday. She was loyal to the people she met, and she also knew her responsibility just in life. She was a very responsible human being, and I was just blown away by how, because I knew what the book was about, and having read the book, I go to YouTube and I look up some Hazel Scott videos, and her virtuosity is just, it's breathtaking. But then to see that the majority of these were from the 40s, maybe the early 50s, but nothing from the 60s and 70s. And I'm sure you have, in your research, have seen some from that time period, but I did not get a chance to see that. And it was just so heartbreaking in so many ways.
It really was. She wanted to be a wife and a mother, but she loved her career. And there was so much about them trying to make her feel guilty. And so I just, if things had been different, think of all that she could have accomplished.
Yes, and I love the fact that you wove Nina Simone into this, because a lot of the things that Nina was able to say publicly, especially as she aged, and she was sort of the grande dame of the piano. I think those were some of the exact same things Hazel Scott was trying to say in the 40s, and yet did not have the canvas to color on that Nina had a little later in life, because they both had suffered at the hands of people in power and men as well.
Right. And that was one of the things. So, I did take a little creative liberty, because Nina was a little bit younger, but she was that whole inspiration. She admits that it came from Hazel, and I really wanted to reflect that.
Yeah, and I loved that. And I did not do the math, but I sort of was trying to figure out. I'm like, I think there should be a little gap, but I will say that and also in the historical notes in the back of the book, you give some other things away that I won't. You may share whatever you want, but I won't give them away. But I thought to myself, there are parallels, sad parallels, I might add, of history repeating itself. And I think in some ways it still repeats itself, because we are in the current time where so many people are trying to silence someone else's voice. And I'm like, dear heavens to Betsy, have we not learned anything?
Right. And that was part of the takeaway. There are some things that I take creative liberty with in reimagining, and I do address all of that in the history books, and in the historical notes. And it's just because there was so much, and I don't want to say tragedy, but bad things that I would have liked to have had a different outcome. And so that's where I kind of had the creative liberty. And like I said, I do want the reader to know what that was, and they're able to see that in the historical notes.
Well, and but I think, ReShonda, that in taking those few liberties, what we do, we see a true line all the way through that, and somebody who shows up in the book, and Quincy Jones was such an amazing talent, but he was such a womanizer in real life. I mean, we can't rewrite history. If somebody was that way, they were that way. And you see just in their time together how very easy it was for someone else to hurt Hazel Scott. Whether they meant to or not is immaterial, but it was just, it was the attitudes of the time. Women were less than according to men. People of color were less than according to people that looked more like me. And it's like we're seeing that kind of thing, I think, in today's world, where people are trying to say, oh, well, that never happened. Well, of course it happened. And it leaves scars, and it leaves always room for improvement.
Right. I mean, history is the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yes.
And a lot of times we want to just forget about the bad and the ugly and just, only the good part. But no, that, so much of that ugliness makes us for a better people today, or even gives us a light on how we don't want it to be again.
100%. So, how is being a novelist different than, similar to, or challenging from being a journalist?
So what I loved about this book is it was the best of both worlds. So I love, as a novelist, just making up the stories. But the journalist part, I love the research. And so this really is the merging of the best of both worlds. At the foundation is all of that research and all of the rabbit holes that I went down as I discovered new material. In fact, one time I had a friend say, "Can you stop researching the book and write the book?" And so to be able to do that, and then there are so many blanks once you go down these rabbit holes and you get this research, then you still have blanks, and that's where the fiction comes in. The novelist in me gets to go fill in the blanks, and that's where my imagination comes in. And so it really is a merging the best of both worlds.
Well, and I'm going to sort of pat you on the back and compliment you that I think I saw some of your journalistic flares in some of your descriptions. I know that. So when Hazel goes into a studio in Paris and also a library in Paris, your journalistic flair shows up in the descriptions. You can literally smell the musical studio. You can physically smell the library. And I know that that's a hallmark of a great journalist, when they give you that type of flavor. As a writer, that often is the hardest thing for me to do, because I feel like I'm in the scene and I forget to put you in it by giving you a reference on what something smells like or tastes like or looks like. So do you enjoy that?
I do, but I'm going to tell you it was hard for me for a minute because I am a journalist. And so it's hard for me to deviate from the truth. There are some instances where my editor would go, "Oh, make that a little different." And I'm like, "But that's what really happened." And my editor's like, "But that's why we're writing fiction, so you can go and spice it up a little bit." And I struggled with that. So it took a lot of rewriting to find that perfect balance of journalism and fiction.
Well, and I think you did so well at it. I mean, I think that just as you were doing a lot of research, especially if it's something that's based on a real story, I read the book in one hand and the phone in the other to look up details. And I will tell you that I often do that, especially if an author gives me a location that I'm interested in, then I want to really pull it up on the map and study where they are. Where is Hazel in Paris? What is she doing? And all those things. That's fun for me. But I will say that you didn't have to do any of that to read and enjoy your book, because you did it for us.
Yeah, and that was my hope, is because what I didn't want is you felt like I'm reading this autobiography, nonfiction. I wanted to transport you to Hazel's world. And that was really a goal that I set out to do.
So before this, you wrote a book based on Hattie McDaniel. Is that correct?
Yes, correct. The Queen of Sugar Hill.
All right. And how long do these take you to do?
Again, you see the sigh there. It takes longer than it should. It takes me about 3 years because I just get in this rabbit hole, and half the stuff I'm not going to use, but now I want to go off and find out about this that happened and that happened. And I'm going down these research rabbit holes, and I actually go to libraries. I get off the internet. I don't do my research on the internet. And so I look up, and the custodian is sweeping like, "Ma'am, we closed an hour ago. Can you get out of here?"
I love that. Well, and I think that as a journalist, that's what you're accustomed to doing. You're accustomed to finding the facts. And of course, I really do think that makes the book that much stronger, because there isn't any of the liberties you took were creative license on your part, but they fit the story seamlessly. And it's just one of those things that it's like, I think readers benefit from journalists writing novels because we get to feel like we trust the writer. At least I do anyway. So
yes, definitely. And that's what I want. I want people to say, okay, this may have some fictional moments in it, but I trust this story that she's telling me. And I really do. I don't change any major things because I don't want especially and not give it attribution. But I don't want the reader to say, okay, Hazel has 7 husbands because I said it in my book and Hazel didn't have 7 husbands. And so I really do try to stick to that.
Which I really did enjoy. So do you have a next subject in mind? Am I getting too far ahead of myself?
Yes, I've already started working on it. And it really is, so it deals with female bootleggers. I did not know that female bootleggers, moonshiners, outnumbered men 5-1. So they are the ones that built the moonshine industry.
Get out of town.
That was another thing that fascinated me. And so I really went down this whole digging up, and I found a story that I'm going to center around that in all of these female bootleggers.
All right. So now, because I asked you before we started recording where you are, and you're in Texas. So did you find that the eastern part of Texas was an inspiration for your bootleggers, or?
Actually, it was New Orleans.
New Orleans.
It was the swamps of New Orleans.
That's fascinating to me, ReShonda. I too did not know that. I interviewed Polly Stewart a couple of months ago about the Felons Ball, and it's about a family of reformed moonshiners. And I asked Polly because she's from Virginia, if she knew the local moonshiner, because I did growing up. I mean, everybody knew it was Mr. Burt Wilson. So the fact that it could have been Mrs. Burt Wilson, though, is really, really exciting.
And they were able to get away with it because people didn't think women were smart enough. It was against the law to search women. So a lot of times the women would hide the moonshine on their persons, on their body. You couldn't be searched. But there was a point where one woman was accused and they arrested her husband and he had no idea she was even moonshining. But the prosecutor said, there's no way a woman did all of this. And that poor man was just at the mill working every day while she was at home running moonshine.
Somebody had to bring in some money.
And that was her. That's exactly what she said. She was like, he wasn't making money at the mill. We have 6 kids.
Yes, somebody's got to do the feeding.
Right.
That's for sure. So, ReShonda, I really did love this. It is With Love from Harlem. It is so magnificent, highly recommended to each and every person. And if you don't know who Hazel Scott is, it's time to get on a rabbit hole and to buy ReShonda's book as well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining me for this week's episode of Out with Dan. You can find more information about this podcast and its host at OutWithDan.com, on Twitter at OutWithDan, and on Instagram and Facebook at GoOutWithDan. This podcast is hosted by Authors on the Air Global Radio Network, and the theme music is provided by bensound.com. Join us again soon for the next episode of Out with Dan.